distributed along its walls and at its gates, as well as guards and soldiers roaming within the walls. In the same way, along its walls and at its gates, as well as guards and soldiers roaming within the walls. In the same way, the immune system tissues are strategically distributed throughout the body, particularly at those points where pathogens can most easily gain entry to the body, such as the respiratory and digestive tract mucosae. In this topic, we will review the cells, tissues, and organs that make up the immune system. Your goals for learning are to list the cells of the immune system and describe their major functions, to compare the functions of primary and secondary lymphoid organs, to describe the structure and functions of the lymphatic system and the flow of lymph, to describe how the structures of the lymph nodes and spleen reflect their functions of filtering lymph and blood, to describe the structure and functions of malt, to describe the structure and functions of the thymus. Here's what you need to know. The 4 basic body tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissues, and their functions. The components of blood, including leukocytes and erythrocytes. To see definitions of terms, click the bold red words. The immune system has 2 major anatomical parts. The first consists of specialized immune cells, many of which are leukocytes, also known as white blood cells, or their close relatives. The second part consists of lymphoid organs and tissues, including the bone marrow, lymph nodes, spleen, and thymus. Lymphoid organs and tissues are the sites where lymphocytes are produced, reside, and come in contact with pathogens. Let's examine the cells of the immune system more closely. The cells of the immune system originate in the bone marrow. Some cells migrate to tissues to take up residence, whereas others circulate through the blood and lymphatic system, entering tissues when needed. Immune cells that travel in the blood are called leukocytes. Leukocytes have traditionally been classified according to their shape and the colors of their granules, if any, when stained with histological dyes. Click the beaker to stain the cells. The 5 types of leukocytes, from most to least common, are neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, which turn into macrophages when they enter tissues, eosinophils, and basophils. Let's see what you can remember about white blood cells. Click the cell that corresponds to each of the clues you were given. These cells have a bilobed nucleus and prominent red-staining cytoplasmic granules containing enzymes. They defend against parasites such as worms by releasing digestive enzymes onto them. They also play a role in allergic diseases such as asthma. These large cells have a U-shaped nucleus and no prominent granules. They develop into macrophages when they enter tissues. These cells have blue staining granules and make up less than 1% of circulating leukocytes. Their granules contain chemicals that mediate inflammation, including the potent inflammatory mediator, histamine. These cells have a multi-lobed nucleus and pale staining granules. They are the most common leukocytes and use a process called phagocytosis to engulf and destroy pathogens. These cells have a rounded nucleus, no prominent granules, and are smaller than monocytes. Examples of these cells are B cells and T cells. Well done. While many immune cells are leukocytes and are found in blood, many immune cells are not leukocytes and reside in tissues. Together, these immune cells have many different functions. Some cells act as phagocytes. The term phagocyte means eating cell. Phagocytes engulf and destroy pathogens, and also act as a cleanup crew to rid the body of dead cells and debris. Neutrophils and macrophages, the major cells that carry out this task, are referred to as professional phagocytes. Click each of the phagocytes to see where they are found in tissues. Other cells, known as antigen-presenting cells, process and present antigens to T cells. There are 3 types of cells that can present antigens. Dendritic cells are specialized antigen-presenting cells dedicated solely to this function. They capture antigens in the periphery, migrate to lymph nodes, and present these antigens to T cells wandering through the lymph node. Macrophages and B cells can also act as antigen-presenting cells. All 3 APCs are commonly found in lymphoid organs and tissues. Click the dendritic cell and B cell to see where they are found when they are not in lymphoid tissue. A third group of immune cells consist of the effector cells of adaptive immunity, the B cells and T cells that were introduced in Topic 1 and which will be discussed in detail in Topics 4 through 6. Click the T cell to see where it is found. As you will see, there are many other cells that perform other functions in host defenses. Most of these cells are leukocytes, but some, such as mast cells, are not. Click the mast cell to see where it is found. The important thing to notice here is that the leukocytes are normally found in the blood, whereas the non-leukocytes are found in tissues. As we will see in the next 2 topics, leukocytes sometimes leave the blood and migrate through the tissues. Remember that lymphocytes are a key component of adaptive immunity. While all leukocytes originally come from stem cells in the bone marrow, the B lymphocytes, also called B cells, mature in the bone marrow, whereas T lymphocytes, or T cells, mature in the thymus. Together, the bone marrow and thymus are the primary lymphoid organs. Click a primary lymphoid organ to continue. The secondary lymphoid organs include the lymph nodes, spleen, Peyer's patches in the small intestine, the appendix, and tonsils. The secondary lymphoid organs are where lymphocytes come into contact with pathogens and are activated. You can think of these secondary lymphoid organs as being like the guardhouses and watchtowers along the castle wall. Guards take intruders to the guardhouse, where they are interrogated, and the army is called out if necessary. Like the guard stations of a castle, many of these secondary lymphoid organs are also strategically located at sites where invasions are likely. For example, the tonsils guard the nose and mouth from invaders, whereas Peyer's patches and the appendix guard against invasion from the digestive tract. Secondary lymphoid organs also house macrophages and other immune system cells. So far, we have learned that the immune system cells and the lymphoid organs and tissues are the components of the immune system. The lymphatic system overlaps the immune system in structure and function. We will now briefly look at the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system has 3 parts: a one-way system of vessels called lymphatic vessels, the fluid in those vessels called lymph, and the lymph nodes. Click a lymphatic vessel to begin. There is is an exchange of protein-free fluid between blood capillaries and the interstitial fluid within tissues. This exchange results in the net entry of about 3 liters of fluid from the circulatory system into the tissue spaces every day. Lymphatic capillaries collect this excess interstitial fluid and drain it into larger lymph vessels. It is filtered through lymph nodes to remove antigens and eventually returned to the circulatory system. Click the heart to see the movement of blood and lymph through the body. The smallest lymph vessels, the lymph capillaries, weave through the blood capillary beds of loose connective tissue. They are blind sacs, or closed tubes, formed by overlapping endothelial cells. The overlapping endothelial cells are supported by collagen filaments that anchor the cells to the surrounding matrix. As fluid builds up in the tissue, the overlapping flaps of the endothelial cells open and the fluid enters the capillary. These overlapping endothelial cells act as one-way valves, allowing fluid to enter, but not leave, the lymph capillary. Click the lymph capillary to see the valves work. Plasma proteins, pathogens, antigens, and dendritic cells can also enter the lymphatics from the tissues and be transported to nearby lymph nodes. Click the blood capillary to see lymph flow through the tissue. Click the blood capillary to repeat the animation. Click the blood capillary to repeat the animation. Click the lymphatic capillary to continue. Lymph capillaries lead into larger lymph vessels, which, like veins, contain valves to ensure one-way flow of fluid. Interspersed between segments of these larger lymph vessels are the lymph nodes. Lymph filters through the nodes and is cleansed of antigens and pathogens by phagocytes. Lymph is funneled into successively larger lymphatic vessels until it finally drains into the circulatory system at the large neck veins. Let's summarize the functions of the lymphatic vessels. They return excess tissue fluid and any leaked proteins to the blood. In addition to fluid and proteins, they transport pathogens, antigens, and dendritic cells from the tissues to the lymph nodes. A third function, one that we have not yet discussed, is carried out by special lymphatics of the digestive system called lacteals, which transport fats absorbed from the intestine into the blood. Finally, lymph vessels, together with the lymph and lymph nodes, form the lymphatic system, which plays an important role in the body's defenses. We will now examine the structure of the lymphoid organs and tissues, starting with the lymph nodes.